the thinking is that it's not focused just on present day reality. You're thinking about long term, the future. You're thinking about regenerative futures and advocating for legal personhood. Because you're making the argument that we're doing this for future generations as well, and this is how.
Hello and welcome to the Ocean News Podcast, an audio series in which we take a deeper dive into some of the most important news stories and the biggest headlines from the Oceanographic newsroom. I'm Rob Hutchins, community editor here at Oceanographic, and in today's episode we have some truly whale-sized news, all the way from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Because, well, imagine this, a place where whales could be considered legal persons with an inherent right to exist, be healthy, and have their habitats protected. It's a utopian vision that could be taken one step closer to reality, because New Zealand's Green Party MP, Te Anau Tueono, has just launched the Te Horoa Oranga Bill, a groundbreaking proposal that could give whales legal personhood and recognise their rights as living, thriving beings in our oceans. Now, before this podcast goes any further, it does come with the disclaimer that it will include some ill-pronounced Maori language. It was in a reading in New Zealand Parliament earlier this week that Tui Ono called their whales sacred ancestors for many communities across the Pacific Ocean, otherwise known among the indigenous communities as the Great Ocean of Kiwa, a reference, of course, to the Maori and Polynesian mythological guardian, Kiwa. But those ancestors, he added, are under serious threat from commercial fishing, pollution, and climate change. This would be a brand new, decisive, and urgent step in protecting those ancestors, the whales of New Zealand. So what does this bill actually do? Well, if it passes, whales could have rights like freedom of movement, the ability to live in healthy environments, protection of natural behaviours, and even the chance to restore their habitats. Basically, it's a groundbreaking piece of law that would wrap protection fully around these beloved ocean giants. Tui Ono has called it representative of a transformation in how we protect our marine species and the wider moana, to create a law that would protect whales by legally recognising their mana. But this law is not just a set of rules. The bill is deeply grounded in Te o Maori, a worldview that sees whales as part of a living, relational ecosystem. According to the bill, Te Mana o Te Tahora, or the whale's own mana, is framed through 5 key principles. The first is freedom of movement and migration. The second, protection of natural behaviours. The third is protection of social and cultural structures. The fourth is a right to a healthy environment. And the fifth and final structure is the right to restore ecosystems. Now, this isn't happening in a vacuum. This effort itself stems from the Declaration of the Ocean, the first Indigenous-led declaration cultivated, led and signed by leaders across the Pacific. It's this declaration that has served as the foundation for many communities and entities working to advance the protection of the ocean space in different forms and jurisdictions. And what's more, is this isn't just symbolic. It could change how government agencies and courts make decisions that affect whales, ensuring their rights are considered, not just human interests. But this effort isn't the first time such an attempt to recognise marine life with legal personhood status has been made. So what makes this time different? And what went wrong before? Back in 2022, the Loyalty Islands province of New Caledonia had passed legislation to recognise sharks and sea turtles as natural entities subject to rights, including a healthy environment. However, that legislation was later found invalid due to what was called at the time a lack of legislative authority. This time, however, Tueono has emphasised that Indigenous peoples are at the heart of this stewardship, adding that when we follow their lead, we can protect our precious species and the places that they call home. It's also worth noting that the bill is forward-thinking in its ambitions, aiming not only to protect whales in local waters around New Zealand, but along their migratory pathways too. It is the ultimate goal, after all, to create a network of marine protected areas and customary measures to protect whales as legal persons, regardless of where in the world they are. It's with this very ambition in mind that the bill fits into a movement that has been gathering momentum and recognition since the 1960s. It's called the Rights of Nature movement, and it's one that gives ecosystems and species legal rights, just as humans enjoy today. Pooja Sharma from Earth Law explains it beautifully.
The essential concept of rights of nature, which is rooted in indigenous wisdom and stewardship and reciprocity, is how do we grant non-human species and ecosystems the right to exist, flourish, and regenerate without human intervention.
Earth law has one fundamental difference from regular environmental law that we see in place today, and essentially it is down to the idea of an inherent right to exist that should be applied across the entirety of the natural world.
So what's different from existing environmental law standards, which is more commonly integrated in our legal system, is it is not anthropocentric. So environmental law allows individuals to more or less commit an act that can impact a ecosystem up to a certain amount before it gets considered illegal, versus earth law recognizes the inherent right for this ecosystem to exist. So any planning or any construction, any implementation of adding a dam would violate an earth law standard. So it takes an ecocentric approach in protecting our environment.
So this approach prioritizes the long-term health of whales, their pods, and the ecosystems they call home. It's about reciprocity and connection, thinking not just for today, but for future generations of whales, and humans too. As Pooja puts it,
the personhood per species, it depends on the ecosystem. So when a specific species has been granted legal personhood, it focuses on the cultural and spiritual and indigenous relationship that the species has to the stewards that live in and around the ecosystem, and also what the species brings to that ecosystem. So really based on reciprocity and relationality is how can one help the other? So how can the ecosystem help the species, and how can the species help the ecosystem? So keystone species are very natural benchmarks for legal personhood because of their role in the food web. What's really cool about the rights of nature movement and the thinking is that it's not focused just on present day reality. You're thinking about long-term, the future. You're thinking about regenerative futures and advocating for legal personhood, because you're making the argument that we're doing this for future generations as well, and this is how.
And, she adds, New Zealand is perfectly placed to lead the way.
It is also unsurprising that it's happening in New Zealand, given like their historical and cultural relationship to nature. But yeah, it would be massive. And I think the West and places like England, places even some provinces and cities in the US are recognizing how legal personhood can grant long-term protection to species and to habitats that environmental law can't.
So there you have it. The future of environmental, or earth law, could very well be shaped by events in New Zealand over the coming weeks, joining a global movement to protect not only species, but the ecosystems they sustain. By recognising the mana of Te Hora, this bill represents a transformation in how we protect our marine species and the wider moana, says Te Ono Tuiono. Whether it passes or not, the Te Hora Oranga Bill is already sparking conversation about law, about culture, and about how humans and whales can share the ocean in a fair and respectful way. If you'd like to learn more about this story, or other stories diving into the rights of nature debate and the protection of whales across the global ocean, subscribe to the Ocean News podcast and head to the Oceanographic Newsroom. This has been the Ocean News Podcast. I've been Rob Hutchins. Thank you for listening.